Welcome, I'm Tafara Gadamu. The 20th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the African Union highlighted Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance in its days of deliberations. But are Africans across the continent aware of it all? And what is being done to reach millions of Africans in the continent and in the diaspora? Waini Musabayana from the African Union, David Wayope from Zambia, and Ayub Mzee from London join me to discuss the issue. Welcome to the program. Let me start with you, Waini. I see in town a billboard, I am African. Who are you trying to address?
Well, this campaign that we launched at the African Union is really aimed at every single African person. We are trying to say to Africa, here we are. Africa is our continent. It is up to us to develop that continent. It is up to us to make sure that we succeed. So if we engender in ourselves a feeling that I am African and feel proud to be African and feel that you belong to the African Union and that as the 54 member states of the African Union, we have the power within us to make a difference on the continent. You will recall that the African population now is about 1 billion. And if all of us say, I am African, I am the African Union, you will also notice that at the bottom, there is the vision of the African Union, which is to promote development, to promote integration, and to promote peace and security. So that kind of summarizes all our ambitions as Africans.
I know about the campaign, yes. And it's good that you mentioned a few of these points that need to be outlined right here. But are you making a difference? Because I see, this is not new. Many agencies have tried to reach out to X number of stakeholders or target populations and so on and so forth. Quite often they fail.
I believe that we are making a difference.
How could you quantify that?
Yes, I'll come to that. We are monitoring the reaction of African people through our social media sites and through our website. When we launched the campaign on the 25th of May 2012, the reaction was really overwhelmingly positive, with African people really relating to the slogan, I am African, I am African Union. And many of them writing in to say, yes, we are African. Even those in the diaspora were writing to say, I may be based outside of the continent of Africa, but I am African and I want to make sure that I make a difference to the development and integration.
Is that what's happening? Are you, for example, you live in London for some time now?
Yeah, I live in London. I'm one of the living examples who can say that this has worked for me, because I'm a blogger and I'm quite happy to go on record and say I own the biggest black blog on
I know that,
the UK, and on the front page, if you visit that blog, is that it's my picture standing in front of that thing, because not only do I find it quite interesting, my readers and viewers as well, I found it quite interesting, and I'm in the process of making that I am an African Union that I'll be using as a backdrop in our studios in London, because in London it's a catchy phrase and it has worked very well.
Well, I know it's a catchy phrase. I'm sure whoever has designed this message must have done quite a job, that's for sure. But my point is, I'm interested in the young of Africa, whether they live inside Africa and this continent where I live too, where we all live except for you, for example, in London, among the African diaspora. Quite often very many people kind of react to these kinds of messages from two perspectives. One, they are attached to it because it is quite catchy, sexy, and so on. The other one is perhaps because of racism. They want to attach themselves to something which they've left back home. Which one is it that makes a difference?
I'll say both of them, because as you can see, the theme now, it's the African Union has moved on from the OAU, and they're making changes not only here in Africa but abroad as well. There are quite a lot of programs that are happening in the UK, where the African Union has been at the heart of it. I'll give an example, the Somali Conference. We've got another conference which is coming up. The African Union is in the heart of these conferences that are happening. So the African Union is something that is making a difference to us, to people in the diaspora. And that's why I'm here to get this story, because had I not had viewers and people are interested, I could not be here at the African Union or to come and pick these stories.
So you're encouraged by the number of people talking to you through the media that you have developed?
Very good, and I could go on record and say that it is the programs that we are getting to from the African Union that are most popular now at our, in London, because here you are talking you have who is who in people that even people in the diaspora have never met. Some of them have been there. They've been in the diaspora for 30, 40, 50 years. When it was the OAU, they don't know what is happening here. They don't even know how it is affecting changes. I've met, for example, the Commissioner of Infrastructure. She's telling me how the roads and hydropower and the projects they are doing. I met the Commissioner for Social Affairs, issues about HIV. We have got relatives back home. We want to know these things. I want to know how the AU is, and the answers that for what the questions of the diaspora are being answered here, the AU, and that is the story that I'm taking to the diaspora.
What about Zambia's, for example, you are an editor at one of Zambia's premier radio stations. How well are you in touch with this whole concept of I am African?
I am African. I am the African Union. We were explained to us. It was explained to us by during our training, during our 2 days training, and I think it's up to us as African media to help the AU translate that theme of I am African, we are the African Union, to our readers, to our listeners back home. And I think it's a theme to me of ownership, encouraging Africans, youths, young, old, to have an ownership, to think Africa belongs to us and no one else. And it's up to us to help Africa and the African Union to transform to where we have to be.
Let me be clear here. I mean, I know you've developed programs on this whole concept back home in Zambia and transmitted them.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm going to do when I go back.
Oh, when you go back. But certainly you must have been talking. I know that you've been working on HIV/AIDS issues and so on and so forth. And basically you're talking not only about issues that concern only Zambia or Zambian young, but also I'm sure you've been covering some African issues as well.
Yes, I have covered HIV/AIDS issues, though quite okay. Yes, the African Union has not dealt so much on issues of HIV and AIDS, but they've concentrated so much on peace and security. But it's my hope that in the coming summits, these issues of HIV/AIDS also will have their own space in the deliberations of the...
I just have one point that I want to just emphasize, and that is that the themes of the African Union Summit change every year. And to recall that in 2010, at the Kampala Summit, the theme was actually on HIV and AIDS, on health in general. And also to mention that there are many commitments by the African Union to make sure that this issue of AIDS and HIV comes under control, but also to get rid of the stigma. So I just wanted to clarify that while this summit is about Pan-Africanism, there have been previous summits that have dealt with other issues. And next year we will have another theme.
Well, certainly, but I think what David is saying is much needs to be done along that track. Okay. Certainly, you're talking about Africa's young too. It's true. I mean, is there some disconnect here? I feel that you're developing these messages largely to address the concerns of Africa's young, which makes quite a size of the population in this continent. You mentioned 1 billion. I'm trying to see whether this is working. Are Africa's young coming to your fold in terms of coming to terms with this interesting message that you have developed? And that's what my concern is.
I think that now comes to us, back to us, the media. We have to help maybe the African Union get the message across, get the young people to be in the fold of the African Union itself. So I think a challenge now is up to the media, working together maybe with the African Union to put the message across to the young people of this continent.
Yeah, in my case, I could say, from my media point of view, 2 different generations, let me say, in the diaspora. The first generation who must have gone there many years for whatever reasons, and who have tried to, they're all political. But there is this generation, I'm telling your viewers that if you go to Europe, you'll find people who are more Pan-African. They've been born there. They've kind of had something missing, and when they see something African, they quickly jump on it. Like my colleague did say, is that it is to us now to try and capture that group. Young people, we as the medium, bring them on board, those who are not believers as well, take on board. And in our case, when we came down here, we have actually made a pact, which is being supported by the AU and FES. We have made a special blog called Scribes for Africa, which is going to address those kind of issues and especially target that kind of audience as well. So those who are watching this program, they can go on our blog www.scribesforafrica.com blogspot.com, which deals with this kind of issue that we are discussing here.
So you're inviting people to come to you, you're not going to them. Does that make sense?
I'm not inviting people to come to me, I'm just making a platform for us to interact and see where we meet.
I'm trying to explore what other means you're developing to kind of to reach out to Africans, whether in the diaspora or inside the continent.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that from an African Union point of view, our communications strategy keeps evolving to catch up or to be in tune with the times. And what you are discussing, how to reach out to young people, is an issue that comes up day after day. So in order to do that, we have realized that perhaps the normal kind of media is not the best way to get hold of young people. The newspapers, the televisions, perhaps they just simply don't have the time to dedicate to those things. And they have moved on. They have moved on to social media. They have moved on to YouTube, to Flickr, to Facebook, and so on, to blogging.
Well, fair enough, but how many Africans can access those kinds of social media?
I just want to add one more thing. As an addition, during this summit, for the very first time, the African Union has been streaming live all the open sessions of the summit. This means that people, young and old, within the AU, within Ethiopia, within Africa, and outside of Africa, can access this information, and they don't have to pay for it. So I think that in this way, this shows that the Union is moving ahead and trying to make sure that we reach out to those audiences whom we might otherwise lose if we just stuck to the traditional media.
But the issue is how many Africans can access social media?
Okay, it's a good point that you're making because the reach of internet is still a little bit limited. But I'm sure we also know that the radio is the biggest communication tool in Africa, and we are making extensive use of the radio. David here, my brother, is one such example, where radio stations across Africa are being approached to carry the messages. And by the way, it is not just about here we are the AU. It is about what the AU is doing, but what the AU is doing is not for itself. It is a member state organization with 54 member states. So reaching out to all the 54 member states and making sure that we tap in to all the different types of media. This does not mean we've dropped the traditional newspapers. We are still in the newspapers, but also we realize that radio, no matter how far we go, still remains the most effective form of media, and we're using that. Here in Addis Ababa, we do have a radio program in order to try and reach out to people.
Yeah, from a diaspora point of view, you know, you must be aware that African Union is celebrating 50 years. Now, from the diaspora, before we put our heads together and we carried the message which I want to share with you today, that we are trying to invite the African Union leadership to London to have a roadshow, reach the diaspora. So we've got what we have put forward is activities for about 1 week. They will be with us, see what we are doing, meet our young people, see and try and interact. And this will happen during the 50 years of celebration of the African Union, which actually started was it yesterday. So it can be tomorrow, but we think it will be around what we have in London called the African Union Day, around that week there. Yeah.
Our radio station is very well listened to. We are on internet. We stream through our website and satellite as well. So we have a wider coverage of people. So I think when the African Union, when it comes to our radio station in terms of voices of Africans being heard, we prioritize that. So the African Union is free to use us to transmit their messages to the people in Africa and Zambia in particular. Yeah, so we are open to that.
In order to reach out to these people, to Africans inside the continent, you've invited a few journalists, right?
Yes, yes.
But I'm assuming that your coverage goes far wider than the number of people that you invited over to Addis Ababa for this seminar, right?
Yes, definitely. We have a running program that we've had since 2010 with one of our partners, the Frederick Ebert Foundation. They're one of the partners that we are partnering with to try and promote the development of African media and their understanding of the African development agenda. So we can only invite so many. But I mean, invite them as in paying for them to come and so on. But outside of that, we have a program where we send the word out to every single journalist that we can get hold of, using all different types of media, so that they come and they get to hear from the horse's mouth what is happening, what are the issues. Then they will then report to their own agencies as they're supposed to report. I can also tell you that during this summit, at yesterday's count, the closing of the Executive Council, 482 journalists had registered to cover the African Union. So this kind of shows that apart from the ones that we are inviting personally, there are also many other journalists who are interested to hear what is the African story. And I also want to point out that the summits provide not just an opportunity to talk about the theme, but it also provides an opportunity for journalists to hear about many other issues. So a lot of organizations come in, they have their press conferences on the sidelines of the summit. And in this way, we are providing a forum to discuss multifaceted development issues.
But quite a number of media outlets in the continent do not have the resources to fly to Addis Ababa, be here for about a week, attend all these side meetings and cover, I mean, they don't.
Yes, you are very right. And that is partly what spurred us to start this live streaming, because we realize that very few journalists from African countries can make it, and also that we are not able to invite all of them and pay for them to come. So how do we take the story out to where they are? So through this live streaming, which we have publicized a lot, individual journalists in their home countries can now access at least the open sessions of the summits and the press conferences of the summit. So more or less they have the same information as the journalists who are here. And we think that this is a very good start. Going forward, as the word spreads, more and more are going to be making use of this medium. And we hope that from there they can then also start now generating stories, because they've actually seen and heard it happening.
When you spread this message, you know, for the 50th anniversary of this roadshow that you're planning to organize in London, or, you know, cover African issues in the Zambian media, what you try to tell me here is that you're trying to put across a message which is pretty much rosy, but that's not what it is. And Africa's young need to know what is happening in Africa. Other issues too, which we all know, conflicts, you know, hunger, underdevelopment, poverty, and all these issues. Africa is not that as rosy as you've said. And sending the message, a rosy picture, doesn't help in attracting an audience.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that? I don't think we said here in this forum that everything is rosy now.
No. But you're telling me, but you earlier mentioned, you didn't mention, for example, conflicts that people need to know. And this is something that we are grappling with every single day.
Today, as we speak, when we left the African Union, there is a pledging conference to raise funds to facilitate programs to bring peace to Mali, for example. And this is not a secret. We have hundreds of journalists right now at the AU trying to understand the issue of Mali and what is happening. So there is no question of saying that everything is rosy.
No.
But what the new thrust, according to our chairperson now, is that there is, yes, conflict, but there is also development. There is also integration. And we have to balance those issues. And this is what we are trying.
Are you striking a balance here?
They cover both. I mean, they're here. They can tell you.
Yeah, in my case, I'm quite proud to tell you that today when I walk into my sitting room, I'm leaving this evening, but when I go into my house tomorrow afternoon, I'll be able to tell my first client, who is my daughter, and say, this is the story of Africa, because every time she puts on Al Jazeera or BBC, she sees people being killed in Mali. But I'll be able to tell her as well that a pledge by Africans has been made, which is going to change the lives of those people.
But what I'm saying is, you as Africans in the diaspora, are you telling the truth? Not only the rosy picture, but also the dangers of it all.
Now,
do you tell your daughter that she has to know that we have also failed the Malians? We should have come to the rescue earlier on.
Now, this is the way I'll approach it. That every single step, even there's this saying which says that even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. To me, as far as I'm concerned, I'll be very happy to go to bed having told not only my daughter, but people in the diaspora, that there is a light beyond the tunnel. And this light is in terms of the pledge that has been made here today. This has not happened before. Maybe you've been here, but what I should tell you that there are so many things that are happening at the AU. I was surprised. I'm quite happy to tell you that yesterday the UN could not even get through with Africa the way they did it before. Africans have said this business is not anymore. We need to make change. There's some other problems which are attributed to Africans.
But that's not new.
Not their own doing.
But that's not new. We have always said we have to do it the African way. I mean, this is not new. It's been there in AU summits, wherever we go, we Africans talking about African issues. You can mention any number of initiatives. It's not something that happened last week. This has been on the table for a while now. But the problem is we cannot pursue the agenda our own way. And what I'm interested in knowing from you guys is when you talk to our African clientele, whether at home here in Africa or in the diaspora, are we telling the truth? So that people would be aware of the possibilities, opportunities, which are pretty much enormous, as well as the dangers.
Okay, you remind me of one thing. I read a book written by His Excellency the President of Uganda. It's called What Are the Problems of Africa? In the UK, I work with the establishment as well. When you're embedded in the establishment, you have to toe the official line. And the official line sometimes includes painting a rosy picture. So it is up to us, we as Africans, to do a PR exercise for Africa, for us to move forward. But the more we keep hitting Africa on the head, we won't be able to move forward. I've got one mandate to do that. For example, my media house, officially we have got 6 million viewers in the UK homes alone. We broadcast across Europe, the Americas, all the Americas, North and South, and Northern Africa and Southern Africa. There are other people who didn't have the opportunity to come here today. They didn't see the live stream, but will be able to send that information into their sitting room, that some things happen at the AU, some money has been pledged to sort out not only the problem of Mali and the problem of Congo as well.
I think I would come to the issue of Mali. I don't think the African Union or Africa has failed the people of Mali. Let's not forget that African Union also is also stretched.
That's what the critics say, and
yes,
that's not just an allegation. And that's not just an allegation.
Yes, critics will have something to criticize about.
It's about making an effective intervention, and up until you master your muscles, so much damage is going to be done.
What we should not forget also is that African Union is also stretched. Mind you, we are in Somalia. African troops are in Somalia. There is no foreign troops fighting in Somalia. So I think we shouldn't forget the aspect that also the African Union or the African continent itself, in terms of capacity, in terms of forces, is also stretched. The African Union is solely in Somalia alone, no foreign intervention, only African Union forces.
Do you tell African stories in your on your radio?
Oh yes, oh yes.
From other parts of the continent?
Yes, definitely.
You tell the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Oh yes.
How do people react to that?
Obviously, people want to
hear the ugly part too.
But yes, people would want
because
balance.
I know that we are making strides, but my question is, are we doing enough to tell the ugliest part our own way before somebody steps in telling it even a much...
Let me say it this way, that when the African Union brings in journalists to come and cover its summit, it would be really silly to kind of hope that all those journalists are going to report on the rosy side of the continent, because that's not their job. They will report on things as they see them. So the African Union brings them together so that they hear for themselves and make informed write-ups or reports in their issues, rather than them hearing from source B. It is better that they come and they hear it from the horse's mouth. Then after that, they report on the way they see things. But at least they will have that information to say that perhaps what has been written here is not necessarily the whole truth. There is another truth. Perhaps uncovering issues that they didn't even know. He was talking, for example, about the program on infrastructure development, which perhaps people don't quite know about. But if people come here and they hear that the African Union is trying to harmonize infrastructure development in Africa, then they will have a different view. If people come here and they hear that there is a program which has been adopted by, I think now, over 30 countries to promote maternal and child health, then they will think, okay, so something is happening. We have many other projects. We have the program on agricultural development, and Ethiopia is benefiting quite a lot from that project because I met with one of the senior officials the other day, and they were telling us that they can be a best case example of how agricultural development is progressing. So those are different aspects that people get to know once they come here. There is also the other aspect of saying, as Africans, we have to tell our own story. We have to be able to say, yes, out of all the negative things that perhaps the world might know about the continent, is there nothing good that is happening on the continent? There are a lot of good things. Many countries are registering phenomenal growth rates on the continent. Why don't we tell this story? Does our journalism just have to be about bashing the African continent, or do we want a journalism which, yes, does bash, but when something positive happens, is also open to discussing the positive things?
The final note, post-May 2013, that's 6 months down the line, what would the scenario look like, you think, give a minute, in terms of what you've been talking about, reaching out to Africans in the diaspora?
Now,
you have registered quite a substantial
I'm going back,
viewership.
I'm going back into the diaspora as a man with hope that Africa is on its feet, is running. We are now making the right decision and moving towards the right direction. And I'm quite happy as well. I leave you an example to say that before I visited the AU, as a journalist, I've been journalist now for almost 15 years. I didn't want anything to do with the AU, but when I started visiting the AU, I've seen the progress. Up to now, I'm quite happy that this progress that I'm seeing here now, I'll be able to share it in the diaspora, and that's why we came up with this idea that it is the time for us to start interacting with the AU. So the time is now.
That's what you're going to see. There is going to be a substantial number of people following you, social media, whatever, in post-2015, because May 2013 is going to be a watershed in the evolution of this continental organization.
Yes.
It's going to be a fantastic landmark, and people are going to talk about it.
Yes.
Is it going to be any different than you see now, the scenario, you think?
The message is that we have been with the OAU now for 50 years, and we have to look ahead to the next 50 years and try to reach a point of achieving development in less time than it has taken us to get here. So yes, I am optimistic that the 25th of May 2013 is a watershed moment for Africa, and that it will renew the African spirit within the context of working together as a united African people, which is really the message that the African Union is trying to.
David, final word.
Well, I think 2013 May will be a year for the African Union to look back at the last 50 years, at the achievements and also the failures, and try to improve upon whatever failures they might have encountered in the last 50 years, and try to improve upon them, and then serve the African people, and the young especially.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much. Well, it was a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much.